So this week I talked to Dr. Jay Bhattacharya of Stanford University, who's a medical doctor, but also a professor in health policy. He's been teaching for years there. He was actually introduced to Rene Girard by Peter Thiel when they were in a Bible study together, and he got interested in him later on after uh, some time afterwards. Um, and and what was interesting about it is I used this discussion to bring up a topic that I've mentioned many times before called pseudo-Gnosticism. But I had a listener, frequent listener of the program, reach out to me and say, I don't understand your use of the word pseudo-Gnosticism. What does this mean? And so I thought it would be a great opportunity to kind of do an entire episode explaining what I mean by the term pseudo-Gnosticism. So we're going to do a few basic term definitions, and then we'll get into how I've come up with this term. And I'm sure other people have used pseudo-Gnosticism for a variety of different things, but I think that pseudo-Gnosticism best explains, it's a bit of a technical term. We can come up with all kinds of other um, terms to label the reigning religion of the West and the globe by extension of the West's influence all over the world. We should explain it. Gnosticism is a second century Christian heresy. It predates Christianity in some ways because of its influence in ancient mystery religions, other types of dualism, religions where you have this separation between matter, the world of matter, and the world of spirit. But Gnosticism has all kinds of different iterations and deviations. It's a very inner peace kind of thing, a kind of inner discovery of the esoteric divine wisdom of the universe, and therefore leads to all kinds of different manifestations of it in history. And so I'm not going to try to encapsulate all of what Gnosticism proper is, but nevertheless, in general, it's basically this idea that the physical material world and our body are prisons. They're traps. They're either evil or, completely bad to various degrees. And we have to escape it. We have to escape our body, escape the physical world, escape the material world. And so, in a lot of Gnostic interpretations, the evil God is the one that created the material world and our material bodies and flesh. And then he's not really the true God. The true God is as a divine God outside of the material world who's in pure spirit. And he is the one that is to liberate us from this prison planet and this prison body. And of course, so it's this idea of trying to get away from the body, get away from the material, and escape to the spiritual. Now, today in our modern culture and the reigning humanist or secular religion that animates the elites and animates a lot of our cultural ideas and trajectories of where we're going, the movements of where we're going in our society, they are thoroughgoing materialists still, even though they don't necessarily necessarily talk about it as much. The average elitist is still someone who subscribes to a kind of neo-Darwinian type of worldview, not just in a biological scientific sense like in classical Darwinism, but rather making it a kind of encapsulating worldview. They have a kind of atomistic worldview in which there is no God. And if there is a God, it's not something that is its own. God is, whatever you make of him. It's whatever you think. It's your truth. It's your personal discovery of God. That's what the elites tend to believe. So they have an assumption of the kind of reigning materialist assumption of that the world is basically, random atoms and random mutation, genetic mutation. And I know that they always pick apart the word random. I don't care. I'm not here to get into that discussion and nuance there. What I am saying is that they are thoroughgoing materialists on the presumption of their rejection of what we would call traditional monotheism or Christian faith. So they reject the idea of a personal creator in the sense of having being and having personality and having an involvement with that creator in the form of personal relationships with his creation. That has been supplanted in their minds because of Enlightenment dualism, which separates mind and body. In other words, the soul and the spirit become something which is a personal flight of fancy, a flight of the mind, rather than being something that can be objectively ascertained by reality. And so they're either dualists or they're monists in the sense that they believe in there is nothing outside of matter, but they function in that plane as basically, materialists ultimately, which is do what you got to do, find your truth, right? All these types of notions. Anything that has to do with the transcendent that is outside of you has been dethroned by these people in their minds. So they reject the idea of a God, a personal creator God that is fully, intimately involved with his creation. And so, how, you might say, can a Christian heresy like Gnosticism have anything to do with what we have modern materialism? Well, as we know, if we walk around or live in this society, materialism is not necessarily the religion, the animus of our elitist culture. It is kind of a dogmatic presupposition on which our elitist culture has been built, but it's not inherently the driving animation of what the elites believe in our society. We have a belief, tabula rasa, blank slate ideology, this idea that you make yourself what you want to be. So I talk about this notion as what I call pseudo-Gnosticism or faux Gnosticism. Faux, the word F-A-U-X, means basically made in imitation. So an imitation. Pseudo means not genuine. I looked up the definition so you could get these words. So pseudo-Gnosticism means a not genuine Gnosticism. Or if you want to use faux Gnosticism, that would be a imitation of Gnosticism. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Everything we live in today, all of the cultural worldviews that we have are a kind of Gnostic attempt to reject the body, to flee planet Earth. Christianity is the redemption of not just the soul, but also the body, because body and soul are intertwined together. There's not like here's body, here's soul, and this kind of hard distinction, as unfortunately a lot of Christian theology has taken in over the years, but rather body and soul are intertwined together. And in the same sense, heaven and earth, the spiritual and the physical, are also kind of colliding together, interacting together. So in the Christian cosmology, we don't want to escape the body. We don't want to escape planet Earth. We want to renew the body in the sense of preparing for our full resurrection. We want to renew the earth. We want it to resurrect, so to speak, as a seed planted in the earth, comes into something greater than itself. It's still physical. That's what we do in history as Christians, is we plant the seed of the earth as it was, and it resurrects through our action in the body of Christ as this something to come, which will be heaven and earth manifested together in the fullness of all things. Our bodies, in a similar way, are seeds, which will be planted and then resurrected into a fuller physicality of some sense that we can't fully understand. But it will be a type of material, physical body. Maybe not as matter as we understand it, but something fulfilling that picture that we now see with matter as we understand it. So here's where I'm getting at here. Pseudo-Gnosticism is ultimately the reigning religion of our society. It is the reigning religion of what we call scientism, which is the deification of scientific elites who are not actually following the scientific method most of the time, but rather are given that title through the power of sacrificial monopoly, which is what the state bestows through its monopoly of funding and grant making and university politics and funding through massive money that the government allots to elite groups like, National Institutes for Health, FDA, all the different grants that are just bestowed throughout the university system, through the state. All of these things are sacrificially protected, so therefore they have a kind of monopoly, fiat control over society in its understanding of what science is. It's an edict. It's a fiat. Let it be so science. It's a fiat science. Let this be so. I shall command this to be science, not actual science in the true sense of the word as we typically understand it, which is this kind of free inquiry, this freedom to question. That is not a part of what we have today, as we saw with the pandemic, as we see with all these hosts of dogmas that we're supposed to accept without question. They are forcefully imposed upon us. So what are the manifestations of a pseudo-Gnostic society? I'm just going to go through some notes I put down to use as a kind of manifestations, these manifestations of a pseudo-Gnostic society. We call it transhumanism. The idea is to escape our lowly bodies, escape our bodies as made, and ultimately to escape death, the reign of death, through some kind of trickery using virtual reality, bits, artificial intelligence, whatever you want to look at, to basically construct an ability for us to leave our bodies and have our consciousness, so to speak, downloaded into a machine so that we can live forever through a material machine. So that's the pseudo-Gnosticism. It's pseudo because it's not accepting the idea of any true spirit. So it's like a imitation spirit in the world of the mind, in the world of consciousness, as a mental phenomenon that can then somehow be downloaded as information into a material contraption that will power a cloud or something, in which you will have this kind of virtual reality existence forever. So that is the way in which this modern worldview acts. It is hostile to the idea of the body being beautiful and redeemable. The body and the earth as being something that can be our home long term, and that what we have now is a down payment on what is to come, and the way we act and the way we love one another through action. That's the Christian mindset, action. That matters in the Christian worldview, but in the pseudo-Gnostic religion of our world, it's all about retreating and escaping the failures and the evils of our body and of the physical world. So what do we get as a result of this? We get trashing the planet Earth. Now, I understand there's a fake green energy industry, a fake green oligarchic, ideology, but it is not the true, pro-human green idea. It is one in which you try to basically, limit through all these tricks, human growth, human development, human innovation, and try to roll back humanity to forcibly be forced to use, energies like solar panels, wind energy, these types of energy that don't really scale for a large mass population in a way that is affordable or consistent to be able to build civilization forward. Very scarce, intermittent, unreliable forms of energy. But those are energy methods that ultimately hobble the ability to ever scale in any way without having massive billions of dollars handed to, middlemen oligarchs who are oftentimes the same biggest polluters, same financial interests that own the biggest polluting energies that they rail against in their little false dialectic to try to get people on board with the end of the world so that they can scare people into more oligarchic control through fake green energy things. But nevertheless, there is a reality to their narrative, to their apocalyptic religion, which is there are evidence. It's not, I don't believe in their catastrophic climate change narrative as they present it, but there is many examples of the way in which we have not taken care of the earth. Using mines and using, massive islands of plastics and waste and trash in the ocean, using earth in a way that is not a loving orientation and a sustainable orientation. That's something which goes against the Christian concept, which is to non-violently take care of our neighbor, not through force, and also non-violently use creation and energy and so forth in a way that doesn't burn down the forest that we all have completely, you know. So there's trashing of the earth. That's an obvious example of a pseudo-Gnostic religion. There's this idea that the world has become a prison. You see this all the time where people, the popular imagination, they're always talking about we live in a hologram universe, that we're living in a virtual reality simulation. Right? That's the whole, this is classic Gnostic ideas, which deal with this idea that we have to have a certain secret wisdom to be enlightened out of the illusion of our reality. Classic Gnostic framework, this matrix idea that's become very popular in pop culture today. This idea has this notion that we are hologram projections, that everything we have to do is try to escape this false reality, and therefore it has consequences as to how you treat your neighbor, how you treat your body, how you treat your relationships, how you treat your disposition towards curiosity about what's possible and what can be done in the world of the physical universe. You're not interested in that as much if we're just in a hologram trick. This is also related to a new phenomenon that's becoming increasingly popular, which is the alien prison planet theory, that many people believe aliens are enslaving the earth and that they have created this hologram similar type system by which you think you're dying and going to heaven, but they're actually tricking you and they're catching your soul when it tries to leave the body and they throw it back into another body. And they basically are mining our negative emotions as a way of psychically harvesting our bad feelings. This is becoming very popular online, actually, this notion of a alien prison planet. This is very Gnostic, escaping the physical world, escaping the material world, escaping the body. It's all a planet. It's all a prison planet. It's all a scam. Get out, get out, get out. What does this breed? Hopelessness, apathy, lack of desire to do anything great for your neighbor because we're all enslaved anyways. I mean, some people find ways to try to come up with positive things, but ultimately the fruits of it are a kind of despondency and a hatred of the body as something that should be a down payment for something greater. It's this idea that we got to get out of this. This is a nightmare. There are some other things that are obvious, manifestations of where we're at today with the pseudo-Gnostic religion. The Gnosticism is about destroying the old world and bringing in the new world, which is the spirit world. Well, we don't have that in their new version, the pseudo-Gnosticism. We have destroying the old world as it is given to us in a natural sense, and remaking it through ideas of the mind that can be patented, or through political, fiat of force, or ideological, kind of compulsion to remake humanity through force, or in the case of the transhumanist manifestation of this pseudo-Gnosticism, escaping this physical world for a virtual reality world, which is supposed to be better, which is going to give us all of our desires of our ego, allegedly. There's another example of the implications of our pseudo-Gnostic universe is things like Metaverse. Again, trying to escape the physical world. Don't try to make the physical world better. Don't try to create energy too cheap to meet, or don't try to create cures for cancer that don't require a patent. There could be a dietary correction or various, things in the public domain that are generic and not patented for the elimination of diseases. Just don't even try that. There's no way anything can happen there. Just escape into the metaverse and numb yourself out. Another way of numbing yourself out is the prevalence of psychiatric drugs, which are so common and overly prescribed, as we know, and are used for everything that shouldn't. They're totally overused, totally destructive to the purposes of psychological health. And again, that's one of the things that you see. Our society doesn't want people to get sunlight, doesn't want people to get their diet correct and remove toxic foods, endocrine disruptors that are creating problems for their state of mind. Seed oils, which affect the state of mind, can create depression and all kinds of things like that. They don't want to do anything to heal and renew the body. It's just take a psychiatric potion that's going to actually damage the body, doesn't address the fundamental holistic problems that are causing the psychological issues, but just mask over the symptoms, and obviously are very nice when they're under a patent to make somebody money. All those things are given to us by, of course, people with secret knowledge who have billions of dollars that can then give us these, these potions that mask symptoms that do nothing to actually correct the problem. So there's no idea of, hey, go out there and take care of the body, get sunlight, get back to ancestral real foods. None of that stuff matters when someone's depressed or has a psychiatric problem. It's just, here's an intellectual property called a drug concoction, and it's in the form of chemicals, but ultimately it's going to free your mind to think in a different way, which is obviously ended up going to be more problems down the road with all the side effects. Another area of the pseudo-Gnostic implications of our elite's worldview is assisted suicide. It's becoming increasingly common in Europe and places like Canada, where people don't like their life. They're extremely depressed. They can be people who are in their 20s, and the government will pay for them to be euthanized. I mean, absolutely insane. Escape the body. The body is bad. Can't be fixed, right? Escape. So every one of these things I'm showing you are the same pattern. Escape the body, hate the earth, hate the physical world, hate your immune system. As I mentioned, transhumanism, that's so popular in Silicon Valley and other places, just a classic example of a kind of pseudo-Gnosticism. They all believe there is no God and some creator personal sense with the objective morality. There is no, goodness. There is no, good design in the construction of our bodies. It's all just kind of a random accident, and therefore we should be able to modify the body and transcend its lowly, pathetic state with either escaping it, again, by downloading your consciousness or other types of upgrades from where we are actually, designed at when we're born. Of course, there's the transgender movement, which is related to this, the idea that, your body as it's designed is not determinant of who you are. It's whatever your mind, tabula rasa, blank slate, whatever you want to construct through your ego, and you can assert your ego to shape and then carve out your body, carve up your body, mutilate your body to make it reflect that you have exercised dominion in an ideological sense onto the body, as if it's a carcass to be carved up as a kind of symbol of your ego expressing itself over and against nature. Again, a revulsion from the body, a revulsion from nature as it is, and a desire to transcend it to a higher state. There's artificial intelligence, all this money going into artificial intelligence and trying to figure out how artificial intelligence, the mythos of it, will save us and replace workers and replace thinking, replace art, replace the need to do your homework, so to speak. All of these things can be transcended through this mythos of artificial intelligence. Again, it's not enough that you just move away from action. That's a movement towards the mind. That's a movement towards a pseudo-Gnosticism, a mental spirit, right? There is no such thing as real spirit. Spirit is just of the mind. So it's materialist in its substrate, but you don't focus on that. You focus on what you can make of yourself in a tabula rasa of the ego, kind of artificial construct of a spirit. And that's where you get things like AI. That's where you get, this fixation on AI, as opposed to actually having a hunger for the mass population to figure out alternative solutions for curing chronic diseases, creating energy too cheap to meter that's abundant and prevalent and not super scarce like wind and solar in terms of energy source, whether it's other areas of trying to alleviate the world and its physical scarcity, like helping with feeding people better with nutritious food, making sure the nutrition is actually strong, that their soil is rich. There's a depletion of the soil. There's a reliance on chemical fertilizers and a rejection of the microbial life that's intended for the soil to produce nutritionally rich food without over, depleting the soil through over monocrop farming. Again, that's an extension of a pseudo-Gnostic worldview, which rejects the material, the natural world as it is, and wants to artificially impose objects which are ultimately intellectual patents. Intellectual patents are what drives all these concoctions of chemical fertilizers, all these new drugs that mask symptoms that don't alleviate suffering in a metabolic sense, but actually are just masking symptoms. Those are things that are intellectual patents, right? That are really fake forms of property. And in that sense, the reign of intellectual property over our society, as opposed to private property like physical property, is another example of our Gnostic or pseudo-Gnostic worldview manifesting in our society. That we don't take care of the earth. We don't think about creating a sustainable microbial, system in our soil. We don't think about, rotating animals and rotating different crops and using holistic methods of raising nutritionally rich foods. We just think about how to escape that world and create constructs manufactured through intellectual patents. Intellectual property reigns supreme. Even in the world, we see this pseudo-Gnostic move in the world of entertainment, that our society now, Hollywood, music, everything has been so geared towards patents and copyrights and less on local performers, local artists, local live music, local live theater, local live performance has always taken a backseat to this national, Hollywood, copyright driven music, film industry that's a top down model versus, why is it that Florida doesn't have a robust Florida film distribution system that's really entertaining people in a Florida way? Obviously, people can always point to little things, but it's not a big deal. Film is centralized. It's not decentralized. It's Hollywood. It's not everywhere. And I know that they've incentivized certain cities or certain states with different tax credits to film their movies there, but they still go through the same Hollywood studio system, which is built on the artificial creation of copyrights and intellectual property rather than focusing on real physical property like where you live and your local community and your city and how it relates to your community and your neighborhood. So there's back before Hollywood had really controlled everything, the focus of going to watch a movie was in the elaborate design and the enjoyment of a beautiful cinematic theater. The theater was a place that was an experience to go to in and of itself. Now they've become, almost decaying, where all the money goes towards the Hollywood studios and their big budget, escape from the local situation. So you have AI, you have mRNA technology, right? These mRNA vaccines using information technology to rewrite, the way in which your DNA acts, the way in which your body acts. And then we don't have no idea what that's going to look like as it continues, an experiment. You have the anti-natalist movement. Don't give birth. The planet's going down anyways. Don't give birth. You're a parasite. Humans are a parasite. Especially, if you're, whatever, guilty of your race or whatever, you're supposed to consider yourself a parasite on the Earth's existence. So you certainly don't want to bring in children. They've catechized people to believe. If you ask young people today, why don't you want to have kids? I couldn't bring them into this horrible, terrible place because they don't believe in Earth. They don't believe, like Christianity says, that that Jesus is going to renew Earth. That he's going to renew it through us in history, not after history, in history. And that, that God is good and that God is saving the world. That is a telos that has been lost in the imagination of people, including people who call themselves Christian, because they're taught a disembodied pseudo-Gnostic view of Christianity in the churches, unfortunately. Disembodied Jesus is no Jesus at all. Another example is moving from natural births to C-sections and artificially medicalizing the experience of birth to make it this traumatic thing that can barely possibly happen without, medicalization and this entire bureaucratized money-making system of C-sections and drugs and all these other things that artificially put you in a position to make your birth a much more harder and traumatic experience. Obviously, there are exceptions where people need to have hospital intervention. No one is that foolish to say that's not possibly that's not obviously a possibility, but that this has become the norm and that people have to revolt against it to rediscover that the body was actually made to give birth, the female body, no other body, but the female body, that is made to give birth, and it doesn't have to be this horrific, horrifying, traumatic experience. It can actually be a good experience. So that's an example of pseudo-Gnostic. You can't give birth. Your body is not able to give birth. It's a traumatic, horrible, terrifying thing. Please flee from it and let our, expert scientism, ideology called hospital, care, medicalize the experience as a disease that needs to be treated. So you see that with that. And as I said with the transgender thing, you escape your gender as given, move out of it, remake yourself and impose on your body, carve it up through medical procedures. Again, lots of people making money off of these things. Carve it up, impose your mind, which is the pseudo, replacement of spirit in the Gnostic cosmology. Now the mind is going to impose its will and assert itself in a violent way onto the physical body as given. There's other ways in which we see pseudo-Gnosticism in the replacement of animal fats with seed oils. Seed oils are a monstrosity of a kind of a made up food that can't possibly be made in nature. The giant factories that have to take these oils and take out toxic elements and leave lots of other toxic elements in and deodorize it and all the different things they have to do to treat it, to create this mass sludge that then is is doctored up to look like food. Why did humanity move towards that? And they still vilify and are taught to vilify things like animal fat, things that come from butter. That's a physical, that's a physical thing. Milk coming from a cow's udder, right? That's butter. Cream, milk, ghee, coconut oil from the actual flesh of a fruit. This is incarnational stuff, material stuff. Animal fat, that's some life had that and it produces fat. And then you can use that to cook with. Those are incarnational fats. Those are real fats. Seed oils are fake fats. They're a monstrosity of intellectual property going awry and creating things that are not healthy and that are destroying human bodies. In the same way, we have formula replacing breast milk. Formula, another seed oil, Frankenstein of a food, very toxic. Soybean oil, all these horrible, industrial chemicals are supposed to be superior to breast milk or things that are closer structurally to breast milk. Plastic clothes, the rise of plastic clothes versus actual 100% organic materials. You don't see many people wearing 100% organic cotton or linen or cashmere or wool or any of these types of things. Those are very expensive. They're very hard to find. There's not a lot of scale to them. A lot of the scale is towards plastic, petroleum-based, or at least partially petroleum or plastic-based materials. And again, people talk about what that does to your health when you're surrounding yourself with material which is not physically. It is. Some of these things are not completely obviously. They're still physical, right? But they're a downgrade from the physical reality that actually works in terms of quality of actual materials from animals or plants. And again, when I say these things, it doesn't mean the answer is just outlaw, whatever is. It's just showing the manifestation of the worldview in real life. A move away from the natural and the physical and the real as much as possible. The fact that so much of our life is mediated through social media, the fact that so much of our life in terms of relationships is mediated through, digital scrolling and dating, digital apps. Again, something that was supposed to be kind of a thing that you would do in an organic community has now been supplanted by apps with intellectual property and trademarks and copyrights and patents or whatever, all the things that are wrapped up into the modern world of digital corporations. They now mediate the starting point of human and female, male and female relationships in dating and social media. Human relationships themselves are completely mediated through the digital virtual world. This is pseudo-Gnosticism manifested in such a critical part of our existence. Another example of pseudo-Gnosticism and its manifestation in our society is the fact that psychology and therapeutic culture has so much more of a cultural worldview impact than anthropology. Anthropology is considered kind of a niche little thing that leftists or whatever have dominated in academia, but much of the world is explained through the world of psychology versus anthropology. So we're not looking at where we actually came from, like mimetic theory and Rene Girard's work. We're looking at how does this make me feel and what's going on in my mind and who can I scapegoat from my childhood and how can I numb out from these chemicals with other chemicals? Again, a Gnostic move away from anthropology, which is going to situate you back as a human person in history, and you're going to be grounded in like where you came from and why humans do what they do, and you're going to look at patterns, and you're going to derive. And anthropology, of course, has been butchered too. So I'm just saying, anthropology, as it properly should be, is a much more incarnational, pro-human, pro-body, pro-physicality discipline than psychology is. Another example would be the fact that so many young people are focused on video games versus action. They don't want to do much but, stream and play video games because instead of trying to solve and fight real monsters like cancer, diabetes, and NWO and trying to create elemental transmutation at room temperature, trying to make housing affordable. None of those dragons are slayed because you divert it all into 24/7 streaming, watching other people or playing, 24/7 video games, which takes all that natural masculine desire to fight dragons and channels it into, unfortunately, too much of a diversion can be a problem. And it's become so symptomatic of our time. Again, a symptom of a pseudo-Gnostic worldview taking hold and creating the manifested results that you see. Another example is fake food, fake meat versus real meat. Can't have real meat. That's a danger. The incarnational physical flesh meat is toxic poison sludge, we're told. So we're going to create patents and manifest frankenfood, little tumors in the lab, and make that the new replacement of meat. Another example of this is end-time theology, which is so popular in so many circles in Christianity, which there's all types of various versions of it, but the general thrust of it is that don't do anything great. Don't try to save the world like Jesus commands you to do. He says you're going to do greater things than him. Don't even try to take that seriously. Just hide, retreat from culture, react to culture, whatever you got to do, but you're not going to be in the driver's seat of culture in this worldview. You're just going to try to escape and get out to heaven because Earth is going to get burnt up and destroyed. It's a disaster. It's a failure. It's a disaster. It's been a complete, failure on Jesus's part. His body. He said, "Yet we're going to be his body." He said that he's going to win the world, but somehow it doesn't actually result in that being the reality for so many of these types of Christians and their worldview. That creates a lack of care about incarnational, physical, material well-being and improvement of people's lives. And there's other examples of Gnosticism in the form of focusing on words and social construct, microaggressions over identity, over physical violence. People are so fixated on their identity versus physical violence that they don't see that it's wrong to kill someone no matter who they are, no matter what their color is, no matter what their class is or whatever. That has been replaced with, well, who's the person which is most victim garbed in their their racial consciousness, or their these are products of the mind. These are consciousness that are basically mediated through political ideology, which is a construct of the mind. Whereas the body being blown up, that's real, and it's being blown up is a real event in physical world. But there's a detachment from the physical world and suffering, physical murder, physical death. Christianity is the redemption of not just the soul, but also the body, because body and soul are intertwined together. There's not like here's body, here's soul, and this kind of hard distinction, as unfortunately a lot of Christian theology has taken in over the years, but rather body and soul are intertwined together. And in the same sense, heaven and earth, the spiritual and the physical, are also kind of colliding together, interacting together. So in the Christian cosmology, we don't want to escape the body. We don't want to escape planet Earth. We want to renew the body in the sense of preparing for our full resurrection. We want to renew the earth. We want it to resurrect, so to speak, as a seed planted in the earth, comes into something greater than itself. It's still physical. That's what we do in history as Christians, is we plant the seed of the earth as it was, and it resurrects through our action in the body of Christ as this something to come, which will be heaven and earth manifested together in the fullness of all things. Our bodies, in a similar way, are seeds, which will be planted and then resurrected into a fuller physicality of some sense that we can't fully understand. But it will be a type of material, physical body. Maybe not as matter as we understand it, but something fulfilling that.